Hello, good evening, and welcome to Prague Chattery 777. Well, we've been chattering about Jethro Tull, and we've made it up to the year 1995 for Roots to Branches. This is a big one. This is a fantastic, fantastic album. Released in, like I said, 1995, and this is kind of a really, really rich later day period for the band. The late 90s, early 2000s have offered some really, really good music. Uh, and, I mentioned a little bit in the last video, Ian Anderson relearned how to play the flute. Obviously, he was always a very good flute player, very rhythmic and very unique, very creative. But at some point in the early to mid 90s, he relearned to play the flute. He learned all the proper fingerings and whatnot. And he developed a whole bunch of new techniques, and he turns the flute into a truly expressive instrument on this. It's beyond just kind of cool licks and whatnot. He really turns it into an instrument of expression. There's all kinds of new techniques that he uses. I mean, he bends notes, he slurs notes. There's different methods of attack that he gets. With the proper fingerings, he's got access to a whole new variety of scales. So we get a very rich musical language used on this album. He also expands his flutes. In addition to the concert flute, he also uses some bamboo flutes and other flutes from different parts of the world. So that gives, again, a richness and timbre on this album. And it's not just limited to the flute playing. The songwriting and the arranging is just so fresh. I mean, this is probably, certainly the most innovative album since Under Wraps. I know Under Wraps isn't the most popular album in the world, but you could take it a step back and say this is the best thing that they did since the folk trilogy, since the Songs from the Wood era. And the songs on this album really kind of reflect that. It's like a Stand Up. Stand Up and Songs from the Wood, those are both albums that are just so adventurous. And each song is like a different little adventure. Every song that pops up it takes you in a totally new, fresh direction. And the arrangements are so rich, the timbres are so rich. And the songwriting itself is so rich, and we get that on this album. We get every song is a listening adventure. Every song takes you somewhere new. There isn't a weak song on the album. It's a very long album. It's a full hour long. That's probably the one criticism I could make about it. It might be a bit too long, but I'm splitting hairs really. On the whole, this is so fantastic. We get a lot of world music influences. Particularly Indian music, so we get a lot of Indian-flavored melodies, a lot of Far Eastern melodies, and again, the arrangements have all those qualities as well. It truly is a fantastic, adventurous, fresh album, and one of their best. This is an absolutely essential record. If you're into Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull, you really need to pick this one up. It's just brilliant. And it's a shame. I think it deserves a lot more credit. Obviously, the classic albums had already been done. We've already heard Aqualung, we've heard, Minstrel in the Gallery, and those albums are fantastic. But when you listen to the richness and the music on this, it really is on another level. They really took it up to another level. You could also call it progressive. This is the most proggy thing they've done since the 70s. The musical arrangements are very complex. We get lots of phenomenal playing by all the instruments. Dom Perry particularly really shines on this, the drummer. I really can't say enough about it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Imagine like Songs from the Wood. When Songs from the Wood pops up in the discography, there's so much freshness, and it's like the introduction to some of those Celtic melodies. He's taking all these different folk influences. This is the same thing, except it's updated. And in Songs from the Wood, I think he was taking a lot of folk influences from the UK. He's taking influences from all around the vastness of the world. Again, I'm just rambling at the goodness of it. I'll talk about the lineup a little bit. We still don't have a totally stabilized lineup. It is the last album that Dave Pegg, the bass player, appears. He'd been on board since the Stormwatch tour in '79, so a very long-standing member. He doesn't play on all the album. He plays on, I think, 3 of the songs. The rest of the songs were performed by Steve Bailey, I think, is on bass. I think. Double check that. We also have Andrew Giddings, who had appeared on Catfish Rising, but was a full-time member now. He plays the keyboards. Of course, Martin Barr, the legendary Martin Barr, still happily at his place at stage left. And obviously we've got Ian Anderson on all those flutes, guitars, and vocal stylings. So that's the lineup. The album cover is okay. It could have been a better album cover, but what are you going to do? Minor details, splitting hairs. Let's talk about the tracks. The album opens with the title track, Roots to Branches. And right away, when you compare it to Catfish Rising, this is just immediately on another level. Catfish Rising, we get the big drum fill, and then it just starts rocking. It goes into that kind of, generic rock sound. It's got that slow build up. You get that nice thick keyboard color wash, and Martin Barr, it's got a great menace. We hear some great unique bits of percussion, courtesy of Dome Perry, and that first flute line that comes out in that big build up that Ian Anderson lies down. It's right away you can see the level that his flute playing had reached after he trained himself to learn it again. And that first flute lick blows like everything else he ever played out of the water, if you ask me. He's playing with such a dexterity, and every single note that he blows into that flute is played with a great clarity and a great great intention, and he's playing some very complex lines, lots of very rhythmic stuff, and the scale he's using is throwing him all over the place. It's really, really good. And that's just the intro. My God, it's gonna take forever to get through this. The song itself is fantastic. It has that freshness about it, but it still is, quintessential Tull. I mean, like Under Wraps, for example, is a very fresh album, but it doesn't really sound like Jethro Tull. This sounds like Tull, even though we're getting all these rich new world music influences into it. It's got some great playing in it. There's a great instrumental section on the title track here. I love the little jazz bit that pops up. A lot of great jazz inflections on this album. And you get that progginess. They finish the verse and it goes into that. It goes into quite a bit of playing. It's really, really good. And the band is just on fire. So it opens with a killer song, Roots to Branches. Lyrically, it's got a cool topic. It's talking about I'm not sure specifically religion, but it's talking about how the truth of the words written hundreds of years ago, the way we interpret that truth now is always going to be a lot different from how it was in the beginning. So it's talking about how it's a song about evolution, really, I guess. It says the analogy of roots to branches. The root is different from the branch, even though it's the same thing. I'm gonna get too deep into that. We got to start talking about the other songs on the album. So track 2, Rare and Precious Chain. Again, really, really good song. This is one of the shorter songs on the album. We really hear some of that Indian influence, I think, on this. Some of those melodies are really, really cool. The chorus is very dramatic and very arranged and full. And there's so many great little bits of arranging on it. Like I love there's one section kind of towards the middle, but maybe closer to the end, where when it comes back into that chorus, and we just get the flute and these percussion. Really good. I hope you know the part I'm talking about. But just before the second chorus, it's just a unique little bit of arranging where you kind of tricks your ear. You think it's going somewhere, then it doesn't, and then it goes somewhere. It goes that somewhere eventually. Really good. I like Rare and Precious Chain. Some great feedbacky guitar work by Martin Barr as well. Really cool. Track 3 is Out of the Noise. Again, this is just another classic little bit of Tull. It's a song about a dog. And it's great. I mean, again, the way that the music describes the lyrics, it's just talking about, the life of a dog and all of his, his little adventures in the streets and whatnot. And that riff, that Martin Barr guitar riff, just is so good at, it captures the wiliness of a dog. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, ding, ding. I don't know what it is. It just reminds me, it's a dog theme. It's what dogs are like. I think that's a really good marriage of music and lyrics there on that. And those verses are really good too. I love that jazzy keyboard that kind of pops up in there during the verses. It's interesting, you know. Everyone talks about how horrible the '80s period was and all the synthesizers and whatnot. But the thing is, they actually never totally got rid of the synths. They just started using patches that were probably more appropriate to the quintessential Tull sound. But you know, the synths they never really went away. They always used them. So yeah, anyway, Out of the Noise is a good song. Track 4 is This Free Will. This is another really good one. We get that that big riff. This album too is kind of a return to those symphonic arrangements, kind of like the string arrangements David Palmer was doing in the '70s. It's not an actual orchestra. I think it's all Andrew Giddings and his keyboards that are you know, utilizing those orchestral patches. But again, the arrangements are very, very much in the mold of you know, having an orchestral arrangement put to it. I don't think that made much sense. Sorry about that. But yeah, this free will is really, really good. We get some of those dramatic string sounds, and again, we hear that world music influence. We hear some of that Indian influence, and I guess so rich, really, really good. Gets to do some great double bass drumming in there as well. Great middle section with Martin Barr, really cool. And a dramatic chorus, Don't Shake My Faith in This Free Will. Track 5 is Valley. This is a contender for one of my favorites on the album. A little bit more mellow than the other songs, more in the vein of the acoustic stuff, so we get a classic Ian Anderson acoustic line that holds it all together. I got a great intro too. I mean, Anderson's not necessarily playing anything flashy on the flute, but there's something about that intro in Valley. I mean, he's just got such a command and control over his instrument now, and that intro is really, really good. Do do do, ba ba, do do do, ba ba, dun 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 dun. Really great stuff. Song's talking about it's kind of talking about racism in a way, I think. You know, talking about how, you know, we on this side of the valley, we love our friends and our family and whatnot, but the people on the other side of the valley, we hate them. And it's talking about the irony of, you know, both parties are, you know, basically the same. There's the same interests in mind. It's just there's a social conditioning that says we hate the people down in the valley. But yeah, it's a really good song. It's got a really great there's a great little instrumental section to it. And it does get dynamic. Like I said, it's comparatively more mellow than some of the other stuff on the album, but it does get, there is some good high energy stuff there. Track 6, Dangerous Veils, opens with some wild flute playing. Again, he's just in such command of his instrument at this point. And it turns into a great song. Again, like all the songs on here, I mean, there's so many fast changes and there's so many great bits of arranging, and none of it seems, you know, useless. You know, like the old argument of the old prog bands that would just, you know, let's put 10 minutes of crazy playing in for no reason. A lot of these songs are extended and a lot of them are long and there's complex arrangements to it, but everything feels like it belongs there. You know, every note serves the arrangement of the song, if you know what I mean. And that goes for all the songs on the album, I think. But yeah, Dangerous Veils is really good. It's got a real high energy chorus, very dramatic. I love the end too when they come back in with that. It's a great outro. I love how that comes in. Again, great drumming from Dome Perry. He was on fire. This is kind of his album, I think. This and the next one. Track 7, Beside Myself. This is a contender for best song of the album. I think he played this one live a little bit longer than he played some of the other stuff. I think this whole album as a whole is underplayed. There's so many good songs on here. But Beside Myself is really, really good. Again, it's in the vein of the you know, folky kind of thing. But you know, it is a full band arrangement. You know, you could almost look at this as, you know, Rocks on the Road 2.0. Rocks on the Road's a very good song. But I think Beside Myself is so much better. You know, you know, it is in essence one of those folk songs that we have from Anderson, but the way that the band arranges it and the way that, you know, the way that it builds, you know, it gets very, very dramatic at the end with that do 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 do. there's a seriousness to it. It doesn't have the lightheartedness of some of the other stuff. Like Out of the Noise has got a lot of lighthearted humor to it. But Beside Myself there's quite serious. About a small child messing down in the streets of Bombay, a city with no shame. And it's really good. Track 8 is another favorite of mine, Wounded, Old and Treacherous. This is where we really get to see some of that great jazzy influence. I just love that flute line. That's some of the greatest jazzy flute playing Anderson's ever done. And again, it's very proggy. It goes through lots of these different sections. It's got these kind of really. I like the slow shuffle of the verses. Great stuff. And lyrically, this is kind of one of the funnier songs lyrically. He's talking about comparing the differences of himself when he was a young man with how he is here as an older man. And of course that's the title, Wounded, Old and Treacherous. It's got some great classic Ian Anderson lines in there, Heaven Expressed on my credit card and stuff like that. I really like that song a lot. And particularly, like I said, that flute line, that jazzy flute line. And when the it picks up at a few places. This when Dom Perry throws the double time underneath, and we get that polyrhythm, we get the it's so good. That's some quintessential classic prog Tull. This is a very proggy album. Moving on though, track 9, It Last Forever. The last 3 songs on the album are the kind of end of the album, so including track 8, Wounded, Old and Treacherous, the songs are greatly expanded. I mean, most of the songs, I think Stuck in the August Rain might be a little bit shorter, but they're pretty well all in the 7-minute range at the end. And this might be my one criticism of the album, is it does get a little bit tiring because the songs are so long at the end, and they're all great songs. I'm not knocking any of the songs, but maybe just having like a little 30-second musical interlude to kind of rest your ears, prep them for the next serving of great music. But minor criticism. Anyway, track 9, It Lasts Forever. Again, it's long, extended, but at its heart, it's one of Anderson's kind of classic folky pieces. And that verse really reminds me of maybe Minstrel of the Gallery kind of era. That so why are you holding my hand tonight? That little section really takes me back to some of that classic 70s stuff. And it is quite good. A little melancholy, but it serves to balance the album. And again, there's some great symphonic kind of arrangements. There's no actual string section here. It's all Andrew Giddings and his keyboards, but it's just got that symphonic sound. I think that goes for the second half of the album particularly, although it's present all the way across. We're nearing the end of the album now. We've got to track 10, Stuck in the August Rain. This is another favorite of mine. I really like this one. I think I've grown to like it more and more the older I get. I've had this album for years and years. I was just a young buck when I got this. I got this before I got a lot of the other Tull stuff actually. But Stuck in the August Rain, again, I love that kind of grand chorus, that da da da, don't stuck out in the August rain. That's great. Again, there's a lot of mood shifts and tonal shifts that go on through it, and I think this one's a little bit shorter than the other ones, but of the longer songs, but it's really good. I really like Stuck Out in the August Rain. Fantastic. And then the album wraps up with track 11, Another Harry's Bar. Ends on a kind of a mellow note. It's more of a ballad, but it's still very arranged, and there's still lots of different parts to it. There's still lots of tonal shifts and whatnot. And there's quite melancholy. There is a certain sadness to it, but ultimately it's a happy song. Even though it has musically it is kind of dreary and a bit sad, perhaps it is an optimistic song. I love that. There's a line near the end. You want to hear some great news? Harry's still here. I'm almost wondering if that was a direct comment from Anderson to his nearest fans. In the early 90s, after Catfish Rising, there was a lot of compilations released. There was a lot of 25th anniversary kind of stuff released. Nightcap is a notable release that was kind of bits and pieces of the Chateau Disaster tapes from the Passion Play era. But I think there may have been a lot of rumors going around in the early '90s that Anderson was wrapping it all up. And another Harry's Bar, I think, is just that little wink to the audience to say, oh no, I'm still here, I'm still going. And like I said, this is a late era classic. And I think this stands up to anything done in the '70s. I think this stands up to Thick as a Brick. I think it stands up to Minstrel in the Gallery, and I think it stands up to the folk albums as well. I think this is a quintessential late era stuff, and some of the best playing by the band, some of the best songs by Anderson. It really is a true classic. So that's it for Roots to Branches. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to carry on. We're getting close to the end, actually. It's a bummer. This has been a long go talking about Tull and Anderson. But we must carry on, and the next album we're going to do is .com, which is very good. So stay tuned for that. Send me a like, send me a subscribe. Thanks again for watching. And yeah, we will see you all in the near future. Take care, eh? Cheers.